Hey guys, how's it going? We are back at it with chapter 4, and actually, it looks like it says chapter 5, which it is, but we are on the same section or same chapter of chapter 4. Alright, so on the previous video to this, we would have done a little bit of work with the distance formula. We were calculating the side lengths of triangles and classifying them on whether or not they were scalene, isosceles, or equilateral. So if you haven't looked at that video, make sure you guys go ahead and watch that video now. But for now, let's go ahead and continue on with what's called the median of a triangle. Alright, so in this lesson, we're going to go ahead and create the three medians of a triangle given the given the vertices of the triangle. And then we're also going to determine the coordinates of the centroid of a triangle. Okay, so we're obviously going to have to define a few things here, so let's go ahead and get started right away. So, the median of a triangle is a segment with endpoints being a vertex of a triangle and the midpoint, spelled and wrong, and the midpoint of the opposite side. Okay, so let's make sure we understand what that means. All right, so this median here, CD, okay, that's a median for the triangle ABC. And again, as the definition says, the median of a triangle is a segment with endpoints being on the vertex. So that's on a vertex of my triangle, and the opposite side, the midpoint of the opposite side. So on side AB, we have a point D that is the midpoint of side AB. So to complete my median, I have to go from C, my vertex, to the midpoint of AB. So that is my median right there. Okay, that's how we would do it for everything. So if I wanted a new median, I could find the midpoint between C and B and call it, I don't know, E, and then I can find another median right there. All right, but we'll get to that in a bit. Let's go ahead and continue with defining what a centroid is. All right, so please write this down. So a centroid, or rather the centroid of a triangle, is the point where the point where the three medians intersect. So any triangle has three vertices, all right, meaning that it can have three medians, okay? And once I draw all three of those medians, for example here, AD, BE, and FC, once I draw all three of those medians, I can find my centroid Q, which is right there, right at the intersection of all three of those medians. All right, so that's the definition of a median and a centroid. All right, we can go ahead and use those definitions in a second as we tackle a few of these problems here. All right, so it says identify the coordinates of the three medians and their points of intersection, in other words, the centroid, in triangle PDQ. Given vertices P is -10, -6, D is -6, 10, and Q 10, -10. So before we even get started anything else, any sort of calculations, let's actually go ahead and graph this thing. So P is -10, -6. So right there. This is P, -10, -6. All right, and then there is D, -6, 10. D. All right, and then finally we have Q, which is 10, -10. Right there. 10, -10. And actually, what I want to do, I want to see if this works. I've never tried this on a video, guys, but let's see if it works. Huh, look at that. It actually does work. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the rest of my side lengths here. Well, it kind of worked. All right, one more. All right, so I wonder if I can. Well, anyways, I think that's good enough for our purposes. All right, so let's go ahead and start figuring this out. First off, we want to find the midpoint of PD. Okay, well, midpoint is something that we haven't talked about since chapter 1. So let's go ahead and write it down. The midpoint formula is, actually, that's not going to give me enough room. Let me actually just write it out. So I'm going to write it over here, guys, okay? I'm going to write it right here. So the midpoint formula is this. I'll abbreviate it midpoint formula. So this is going to be x1 plus x2 over 2, comma, y1 plus y2, comma. So this is my midpoint formula. I'll actually call it MPF. My midpoint formula, x1 plus x2 over 2, and then y1 plus y2 over 2. That'll give me a whole new ordered pair. So let's go ahead and find it. So PD, so let's see. All right, so my midpoint formula is going to be -6 plus -10 over 2, and then 10 plus -6 over 2. What is this going to be? This is going to be -16 over 2, comma, 4 over 2. So that'll reduce all the way down to -8, comma, 2. So -8, comma, 2, I'm going to go ahead and draw right there my midpoint. All right. Now let's go ahead and find the midpoint of DQ. So my midpoint of DQ is going to be -6 plus 10, and then over 2, and then finally 10 plus -10 over 2. Right? What does this reduce to? This is actually just 4 over 2, and then 0 over 2. So we really just have 2, comma, 0. So 2, comma, 0, and look at that. It looks like my straight lines were dead on. All right, and then finally, let's find PQ. Whoops, it's probably not big enough. All right, PQ is going to be -10 plus 10 over 2, and then -6 plus -10 over 2. This is really just 0 over 2, comma, -16 over 2. So really I have 0, comma, -8, and we were kind of close. We were a little bit off, but that's good enough for our purposes. All right, so I have everything I need. All right, I have all of my midpoints, And now I can go ahead and draw all of my medians. So let's go ahead and do it. So my first median is going to be right here. Let me make it in red. All right, so from, let's see, PD. Let's go ahead and make my first median here. No, that was a little bit off. Let me try that again. Nope. Try once more. No, I think I'm gonna have to do this by hand. Sorry guys, I thought it would be a nice little tool there, but it doesn't look like it's working. So let me try this by hand. Hopefully I can draw a nice straight line. That wasn't too great, but it wasn't horrible. Let's try the next one. My new line right there. And then finally, the last one. Alright, so if I would have drawn them all perfectly nice, you would have seen that my centroid is actually right there. And the coordinates of that centroid are -2, comma, -2. Okay, so again, what did we just do? We we graphed all of our points, right? Once we graphed all of our points, we found all our midpoints. With all of our midpoints, all we really have to do is start from one of the vertices. So like for example here on D, and I have to go to the opposite side, right? I go all the way opposite and I find that opposite midpoint. So I connected those two. From P, I went to the opposite side to that midpoint, and then finally from Q, I went to the opposite side, which was that midpoint. I connected all of them, and then I noticed that there was a point of intersection, and that was exactly at -2, 2. That is my centroid. Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about why centroids are important, but just know that that's basically where this triangle holds all of its balance. Okay, that's directly on the center of this particular triangle. Okay, all right, let's go ahead and try another example. And then I'm actually going to have you guys try one of these on your own. But actually, maybe I'll have you guys try this one on your own. Yeah, why don't you guys go ahead and try this one on your own, and then we'll do number 3 together to finish off today's lesson. So go ahead and try out number 2. Do the same steps as before. You can use your midpoint formula. And I'll write it over here once again. x1 plus x2 over 2, comma y1 plus y2 over 2, and go from there. Alright guys, go ahead and pause the video at this time and try that one out. Alright guys, let's go ahead and run through this fairly quick here since you guys have already had a chance to try it out. I'm going to go ahead and start by graphing everything. So -9, -1 is my A. My B is going to be -7, -9, right there. And then finally, my C is going to be 1, 1. Alright, I'll give this another shot. Hopefully it works. I'll do this in, I'm actually going to do it in black here. Oh, no, it didn't want to work. Oh, wait, I think I got the hang of it. Alright, let's try once more. There we go. Alright, so I have my triangle here. Let's go ahead and find my midpoint. So first off, AB. So I'm going to add -9 and -7. -9, 7, 2, comma, -1 plus -9 over 2. So this is going to equal -16 over 2, -10 over 2, which will finally ultimately reduce down to -8, comma, -5. Next one, my midpoint formula is going to be BC. So let's go ahead and do -7 plus 1 over 2, and -9 plus 1 over 2. This is going to give me -6 over 2 and -8 over 2 for a final answer here of -4 comma -3 comma -4. 3 comma -4. And then finally AC. So -9 plus 1, -9 1 over 2, and -1 over 2. This gives me -8 over 2, comma 0 over 2. For a final answer of -4 comma 0. All right, so I have all of my midpoints. So let's go ahead and graph them. So -8 comma -5 is right around here. Look at that, right on the money. So right there. -4 comma 0 is right here. So we were pretty close. And then finally, -3, -4. That one was on. -3, -4 is right there. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and graph all of our medians. All right, let's try this out. Let's see if this works. Oh, wait. I wanted to actually use the... It looks like the only way it'll work is if I wiggle it around like that. All right, good. Now let's try one more. From A to the other... Whoops. From A to the other midpoint. Oh, that didn't work quite that well. There we go. And then finally, one more from C all the way to the other side. All right. Looks like we have a centroid right there. And our coordinates here are going to be -5 comma -3. So if you got -5 comma -3, you guys are right on it. Perfect. This is what you should have gotten for your centroid of ABC. All right, guys. So again, just a quick recap. What do we have to do first? Well, first off, we obviously have to graph the triangle. Once we have our triangle, we can go ahead and find all of our midpoints. Once we have all of our midpoints, we have to take each vertex. So for example, here, the vertex A goes to the opposite side, so it connects to that midpoint. We go at B, goes to the opposite side, connects to that midpoint. And then finally, C goes to the opposite side and connects at that midpoint. And obviously, we ended up connecting all of those different medians to find our centroid. We got coordinates of -5 comma -3. So hopefully you guys got that one correct. If you didn't, make sure you go back and retry, check all your work, double check that you have all of your calculations made correctly. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 3 together. So it says an interior designer is creating a custom coffee table for a client. The top of the table is a glass triangle that needs to balance on a single support. Right, so this diagram right here is that particular table. Okay, so pay attention to that table. Now it says if the coordinates of the vertices of the triangle are 3, 6, 5, 2, and 7, 10, at what point should that be supported? Or at what point should the support be placed? Well, let's think about that, guys. What did I mention before? I mentioned something about the centroid. I said that where all these medians are and where they connect right in the middle, right, that gives you a sort of balance, all right? So if we only have one single support for this table, then we should probably put it where we know it will balance. That is the centroid. So this is just basically a word problem, a real world problem that is essentially the same exact thing that we've been doing in the past two problems. So we have to go ahead and graph this first. So let's go ahead and get started right away on graphing. I'm going to go ahead and graph my points. So 3 comma 6 is right there, 5 comma 2, and then 7 comma 10 right there. Ooh, it's kind of a small triangle there, but we'll work with it. Let's see if we can connect these up right here. I want to get through this pretty quick, so I'm going to go ahead and skip using those little line segment tools. But let's go ahead and find our midpoints. We know that that's our next step. So let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go ahead and find, well, let's see, let me write the coordinates here. This one was 3 comma 6. This one's 7 comma 10. This one is 5 comma 2. All right, I'm actually going to go ahead and find this length first. This length right here, or sorry, the midpoint for this side, I should say. So let's go ahead and do it. So I'm going to go ahead and do 3 plus 5 over 2 and 6 plus 2 over 2. This is going to give me 8 over 2, 8 over 2, for a final midpoint of 4 comma 4. So 4 comma 4 right there. All right. The next one I'm going to go ahead and do is this top side here. Whoops. I don't want to delete that much. There we go. Let's go ahead and do this top side here now. Okay. So let's find the midpoint of that top side. So let's go ahead and do 3 plus 7 over 2 and 6 plus 10 over 2 to get 10 over 2, comma 16 over 2, which will give me 5 comma 8. Go ahead and graph that. 5 comma 8, look at that, looks pretty good right there. And then finally, one more here. Let's go ahead and find this little bottom piece, or the side, I should say. This one right here. Alright, so let's find the mid part right there. This would be 5 plus 7 over 2, and then 2 plus 10 over 2. This will give me 12 over 2, another 12 over, for a final midpoint of 6 comma 6. Looks like it's right there. Okay, and once again, I'm going to go ahead and draw my medians here. So I'm going to start at this top right corner. All right, and I'll see if I can adjust it so it looks a little nicer. There we go. Let's do another one from this bottom piece up to this middle right here. Okay, and then finally one last one from grab my little tool here, from this point on the left to this other right there. Alright, it looks like we have a centroid of, I'll do it here in green, right around there. And my coordinates there, I believe, are 5, 6. So my support for my single leg table should be at 5, 6. So because this is a word problem, let's actually go ahead and write it out like that. So the support should be placed, should be placed at 5, 6. There we go. All right. So again, guys, nothing too crazy here. The only thing you definitely need to remember is how to calculate your midpoints. Once you have your midpoints, you go ahead and plot them all down on your graph. If you do that, create all your medians. Go from one vertex to the opposite side of the midpoint of the opposite side. Same thing with the other vertex, and same thing with the last vertex. Once you do that, make all of your medians, so just draw straight lines right through those, and you'll notice that there is a specific point right in the intersection of all three of those medians, and that is called our centroid, our support, alright? The very, very center of our triangle. Alright guys, I think this is going to be it for today, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here, or stop the video rather, and then I will see you guys in the next time. We'll go ahead and talk a little bit about altitude, another very similar type of topic. Alright guys, talk to you later. Bye.